Today on the Idiot's Guide, we're talking about what we should have learned as kids that make it harder to adult. And also, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the bear got out on the flight. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Prophet Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. All right, everyone. Well, I could probably go on for quite a while trying to figure out all of these really, really important things that that, that we missed out on as kids that probably could have really been valuable when now I'm an adult. And being an adult is tricky. It's challenging. So, what I would say is this: is today in this episode, what we're going to do is kind of unpack some really, really essential phrases or some concepts that, we find ourselves saying, we find ourselves being told by individuals. But I think there's one root phrase or one root thing that this kind of stems from in the first place. And, honestly, this was brought up by Joe, so I'm actually going to let him introduce this. But, Joe, why don't you start us off by kind of what this is, like maybe where it came from even.
Yeah. So I was talking to my daughter the other day. She just turned 19. And so I was talking to her, what are some of the hardest things about being an adult? And she named a couple, which actually we will discuss on the podcast in future episodes.
Yes.
Kids, great source for podcast material, as our listener well knows about my stories. But one of the things that she said was being okay with hearing no. And, it's one of those things where kids really aren't used to hearing no as a definitive answer. A lot of times you say no, and there's talk back, there's a compromise, there's something that happens there, or you just give in because you're tired of hearing the complaining as a parent. And so now that she's an adult,
I think of all the phrases though, like I say, like, because I said so, or asked and answered, like all of these things that my kids are like, but why? Why is this? How come? And I was like, you didn't get the answer you wanted, but I gave you an answer. Like,
yeah. And I think for her, now that she's an adult, she realizes that there are things that she just can't do that she got away with as a kid.
Yeah.
There are things that she could have done as a minor that now as an adult, and it's not a matter of, some parent telling her no, it's that it's just no. And so for her, that was one of the big things that becoming an adult and learning how to adult was a struggle for her. And she still struggles with. She still struggles with accepting no as an answer and not being able to compromise her way out of it.
Yeah. I think that it's hearing no when you're a kid always has these, like, I think there's room for negotiation as you get older. So, like, for example, I have a 7-year-old versus a 15-year-old. My 7-year-old, if I say no, it's final. Like, and but then the temper tantrums happen, and then the yelling happen, whatever it is. Like, not saying I'm the one that's yelling, it's the one that she starts going crazy and just starts fighting everything about this because it wasn't what she was looking to hear. She wanted to hear, yes, you may have candy or ice cream or, all of the sweets. But when my 15-year-old asks, it's a different kind of question. If I say no, I have to be prepared. Like, this is a debate for presidential, positioning, because he will come with all sorts of back counter arguments that are really legitimate. And I'm like, oh man, you've got me in a corner, So I think there's progress to it over the years, but also the fact of, learning that no at its base and root form is a form of boundary. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really what, you know, is the attempt to try to establish when we're, parenting and talking to our kids, so that later on in life when we hear no, that's what it means, is it's somebody has set a boundary and it's their choice. It's not ours. I can do what I can to try to manipulate that into my favor, but unfortunately, like, you're your own person and you're allowed to say no to stuff.
Yeah. And it's accepting it on the other
Yes.
side. And I mean, this really is the fundamental, uh, I guess, premise of Karens. Is they can't accept no.
It's true.
They go somewhere, they want something, and when they can't get it, they say, "I want to talk to your manager."
Right.
And then when the manager doesn't do anything, they rant and rave, and they end up on YouTube.
It's
and
true.
and I think that's the thing is we are getting more and more Karens today. What was the male version? Was it Ken's or
Kevin?
Kevin's?
I've heard a couple different things,
Okay.
but Kevin's probably the most universal I've heard.
Okay. So we get a lot more Karens and Kevins that are doing this. They want to get their way. And they weren't taught
Mm-hmm.
as kids to accept no as an answer. And as kids, what they're dealing with is, can I go and see my friend today? Can I have candy? Those are simple things.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, the things that we have to accept no to is getting a job. It's not getting or getting an unfavorable performance review,
Asking someone out.
asking someone out, rejection. And there are things where it's more serious to get no's, and they're more definitive no's.
Yeah.
A loan for a car, a loan for a house. Those come back as no. There's no bargaining there.
No.
It's just,
True.
it's no.
Yep.
And a lot of us didn't learn how to accept no as a kid because, and I mean, we do the same thing. We give in. But eventually we all learn, unless we turn into Karens and Kevins. But there are a lot of other things that went along with that. And so things that we should have learned as kids that make it a lot harder to adult.
I think the thing to point out is, if you do evolve into a Karen and a Kevin, the lesson will be learned when you end up getting arrested or whatever
Lose your
for
job.
what you're doing, and how you treat people. Like, that's very much like my 7-year-old hearing a no. It's, I'm expecting a different answer. Now, granted, I have been in a position where I thought somebody was rude, and I wasn't a Kevin, but I thought somebody was rude, and I asked a question, and the way that they responded, I knew the answer. And so when they didn't give that to me, they gave me more of a no. It was my emphasis to say, all right, now I'm going to escalate this because you technically are being a Karen or a Kevin, And so it can go both ways in that sense. But I think, the more important thing is to know that when you're having these conversations, accepting a no is a really valuable part of almost every single day of what's going on, how we manage our time.
Yeah.
And
to go along with Adam's comment, not every time do you have to accept no. Accepting no in general circumstances. So, and just to give an example, people were probably seeing me as a Kevin for a little while. I have to deal with state agencies and things like that, being a foster parent, and there were some serious problems with the handling of one case with one of my kids. And I raised issues, and I went all the way to the director of our state's division. And I yelled the entire way up there. And it was frustrating, but it was something where that was defending someone's rights. And so there are times when you do not accept no. And there are other times where you need to accept no. And so learning the difference as well is something that's really important. Knowing when to accept no as an answer and when to not accept no as an answer.
It reminds me of there was a season where I was working with my son's school for going through some filing and paperwork and things like that, and the staff was really dragging their feet, and I remember a specific moment where I walked into the office. And I've been going back and forth, phone calls after phone calls after phone calls, talking to this person, talking to so and so. I mean, I took it all the way up into the district to get answers, and I ended up standing with my arms folded over the side of one of the staff members' desks while I watched them complete the paperwork that I had been asking for a month for them to complete. I'm like, look, I'm not wrong here, guys. Like, I shouldn't be your boss, but right now I feel like I am. That's when I had to put the Kevin hat on.
Yeah, exactly. So there are times when it's important. Usually it's when we're protecting our kids.
Yes.
Other times where it's, okay, we need to accept the no and not be a frivolous Karen or Kevin.
Yes.
So some other things. So Adam did a really good job here. He went and found 19 other...
it was 20, but I deleted one.
Oh, okay. Other items that we should have learned as kids that we didn't, that make adulting harder. So hopefully by going through these, we're not going to hit all of them. We just don't have that kind of time. Maybe in future podcasts, we'll revisit this. But we'll go through some of these, and hopefully it helps you guys out there learn a little bit better how to be better at adulting. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea. So one of the ones that I like here is it's okay to ask for help.
No, it's not. I'm a dude. It doesn't work. It's like everything comes with instructions. Even this recording software that I'm working with, I'm still trying to figure out, and it has a manual, but I don't look at the manual. Why would I look at the manual?
No one reads the manual.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. If I got to put together a crib, I'm a dude. I can do this. Like,
that's right.
It's inherent in my it's who I am,
You don't pull over and ask for directions.
Nope.
You don't pull up Siri and ask Siri for directions.
I have an amazing sense of direction.
That's
just
right.
Internally.
Uh-huh.
I will get there eventually.
There you go. My wife calls them adventures.
Adventures. Where are we headed? This way. You don't have a map? Why? What map?
Exactly. But yeah, it is that very sexist attitude of, I'm a guy, I can do it without instructions.
Why'd you have to bring up sexism? Jeez.
I know, always with the isms. But that's kind of how our generation was raised, and how a lot of generations. Now, it was a lot less in our generation than it was even in previous generations, and it's slowly going away. But that's still a big thing. There are a lot of Congress people who talk about
say that really quietly, Congressman.
This type of masculinity that should exist in society, and it really makes life so much harder. Whether you want to call it masculinity or not, that whole attitude, and there are women that express this attitude as well. It's not just a male thing. Which is why it's so weird that it's such a sexist idea, that only men cannot ask for directions. I'm a man, I don't need directions. Both, or all genders do that equally. But the idea is it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to go it alone. As a foster parent, I'm talking a lot about this today. We work with teenagers, and there are a lot of teenagers that age out of the system, and we try to reach out to, we work with teenagers because if they go out in the world, they really don't have a lot of help or support. They just try to do it alone. And so the idea of it's okay to ask for help is something that we do a lot in our household, and help them to understand that, yeah, it's perfectly okay to ask for help.
I think it's important to receive it, as a parent, being, if that's how we're wanting our kids to be comfortable doing, is asking for help or reading instructions or whatever it is, looking up in a roadmap, is being willing to help them find that answer. If you don't know the answer, be also willing to look for that help so that you have that as an example that you can be,
Yeah. Yeah. One, I follow a lot of Socrates' methods. So Socrates, ancient Greek philosopher, great teacher. But the Socratic method is a method of teaching that works for quite a few people, not for everyone. But it's something that I generally teach with. One thing with Socrates again, this may be completely apocryphal, but there's a lot of history about this from Plato. But Socrates went to the Oracle at Delphi, and the Oracle told him he was the smartest person living. And he didn't believe the Oracle. And so he decided he was going to travel around and figure out or find people who were smarter than him. And so he went around, and what he found was that there were people out there that acted as if they knew more. But once he actually started questioning them, which is where the Socratic method came from, they basically proved their ignorance by talking to him. They couldn't prove their points. And so what Socrates realized is that he was the smartest person, not because he knew more than anyone else, but because he accepted his ignorance. And so...
Is that kind of like us being the idiot's guide?
Exactly. We accept that we're idiots, but we're going to give what information that we have out there. And so this idea, it's okay to ask for help. You are accepting your ignorance.
Yeah.
It's okay. Socrates did it. He's one of the greatest philosophers we have. His whole idea was, I am the smartest simply because I accept my ignorance. And so asking for help, really a good thing. And it's only modern that we actually have this, I can't ask for help because I am man, grunt, grunt.
Grunt, grunt. So I think that, one of the things that when we talked about like wanting to name even the name of this podcast, was a big part of that had to do with just kind of, I think we've mentioned this before, but that self-deprecating sort of perspective, not in a sense of like we're proud to be idiots, but that, we want to come from a position of knowing that we're idiots first. And then, from our experiences, some of them were really stupid, we can glean from that, things that we can impart wisdom and guide other people. One of the things that stood out to me on this list was, I don't know, it sounds kind of corny, I guess, but it's this, your journey is unique. It sounds really super like broad and just like you are your own person, and just embrace you. Okay. But in reality, like when we go back to the idea of no, I grew up in a situation where the idea of boundaries was not there. Like it just wasn't part of my life. And so the invasion of those boundaries was a normal thing. And up until just a few years ago, I'm discovering that I'm like, wow, I had no boundaries. Like, and it wasn't like I had no boundaries. Like I didn't know what a boundary was. It was actually the other way around. It was, I just allowed myself to be a doormat, whatever they needed it. I just did. And learning that the power of no was a big part of that. And I think that that's where my journey is unique is, well, that's also in the fact of saying, it's okay if you don't want to. Like, you have the right because that's your story, not mine. Like, if I want to be part of that, but that's your choice. And that, I think, is where I see this, your journey is unique, is I can't write your story. You get a chance to write it. And I try to impart that into my kids, that they have a chance to the experiences they go through when they're kids, talking about them, like, how was this? What did it feel like? Man, that was crazy. Oh, that hurt. Geez, all those things. Like, even arguments with their friends at school or whatever, like walking them through that course, but also with the idea that they're working with another person with a different story than them as well. So at that young age, it's still their own unique story. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
And understanding that everyone's different. So my wife and I have been doing couples therapy for the last little while, which is always healthy to do.
Hmm.
Again, it's okay to ask for help. But when you're dealing with, kids that have a lot of trauma, it does bring up some things. And,
Yeah.
because normally we have the patience to deal with our idiosyncrasies. But then you add the trauma of the kids, and now you lose that patience. And
Yes.
so, and those idiosyncrasies are that uniqueness for everyone. Everyone's journey is unique. And today in therapy, we had our session a little bit earlier today, and we were talking about how, uh, you know, me and our two daughters that are living at home are night owls. We are awake until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm fine.
Hmm.
I don't need a lot of sleep. My wife is not that way. She has to go to bed at 9 o'clock and she hears everything. If we make even the slightest sound, then it wakes her up and it's terrible. And so we were talking today about maybe creating a special room for her where she can, fully soundproofed room and all this stuff. And at first she was very against it because she grew up in a very traditional, loving household of husband and wife sleep in the same bed in the same room. And so doing this soundproofing to benefit her and allow harmony to exist, because the three of us that are wild and crazy at night uh, feel restricted in not being able to be ourselves at night. That to her was very aggravating. The idea of not sharing a bedroom and having her own special bedroom.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find that weird. It's the first time that we've ever talked about it.
I think it's interesting because I think about like my wife's grandparents and my grandparents. Like they both had their own special spaces. Like
Oh, see.
even like maybe at some point there's like individual beds in the same room, but like it was not uncommon to see two different bedrooms that married older my grandparents had two different rooms that they slept in.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, you guys stayed married. Maybe you did it right.
Well, the idea, I think, too much today, we equate this uh, constant, glued to the person next to you as love,
Right.
when that's just personalities. It has nothing to do with love.
Yeah.
Love is the emotion of that caring, that, undefinable
It's an
pull
investment
that
that
you
you're
have to
putting into
someone
it.
else.
Yeah.
But we each have our own unique backgrounds. We each have our own unique journeys. And not only does that make us different, but it makes our reactions to the world around us different,
Hmm.
And so being able to accept that and recognize that we are all different. We're all on a different journey, and being able to accept that. And especially if we can learn from a very young age to accept that, a lot of things that we come into, here's another ism, racism. Young kids generally aren't racist. That's something that's learned, not something that is from the womb. And so a lot of the things that we run into, it's because we were taught that.
Hmm.
And that's the journey that we're on. Either we're taught not to do that or to do that, whether actively or just through behaviors, it happens. But, just knowing that we're all on a different journey and being able to accept that is something that young kids start out knowing, and then it's almost unlearned.
True. Yeah. I mean, you get into these cliques and you start this assumption about other people. And I think that assumption gets us in trouble. Don't assume too much about the next person or the person next to you. It's more about, you you focusing on, your own unique story. And also, like, I think another one that's on here that I really like is lead by positive example. Is, I might not be able to be, I should not influence your story in a manipulative way. I can be part of it, but it doesn't. It's unique to you, and so, I want to look at that and say, well, then I can do these things and be a positive example in that life, in other people's lives. And so oftentimes that's a daily function. I feel like for me is that I try to communicate in the things that I do and the stuff that I take care of, not keeping track, like, man, I did this and this. What'd you do today? Kind of a thing. I'm not flexing. What I'm doing is I'm more going, okay, well, this stuff needs to be taken care of, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make sure that this stuff is done well. And if I can't, then I can't. But seeing, that process, for my kids witnessing me process and prioritize and check off these certain boxes and take care of this certain task, and do it honestly, like, I think my kids always look at me and go, like, I don't know how you do it with such ease, but I'm, just simply doing a task like the dishes in my house, kind of a thing. I think we talked about that on an earlier episode, but it was something that really made it like, just to provide an example of just kind of continuing to push forward and being good energy to people as much as you possibly can. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Well, and they always say, what is it? Something about a smile, but a smile changes. I wish I could remember the phrase. It's like you don't know what your smile is doing to someone else, and so smile every day, something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the idea. Is if you just give out that positive energy, I don't like to necessarily call it energy, but you give out this positive vibe, and it impacts other people
Mm-hmm.
the same way as a negative attitude does. And you have a negative vibe, a negative attitude, and that brings people down.
I think an interesting observation here in Utah is that that smile exchange, or that just positive energy, usually is not reciprocated. It's it's usually the other way around, where somebody accidentally made eye contact with you and they now shut it out, like put their blinders back down, and you're like, I just smiled, I was just being friendly, and like, that's what I've witnessed. If I travel around in downtown or something like that, it's just kind of a strange cultural thing here.
I don't think it's just Utah.
No, you're right.
So I think it's more of a big city, not necessarily calling Salt Lake a big city.
It's a huge metropolis. 4 buildings. I think we have more than that, but
Yeah. Being from Los Angeles, I would have a hard time calling that a big city. But I think it's a big city thing,
Okay.
city dweller thing. When you get out into more country areas, so areas that are more similar to the South, so small town feels, you get more of that acceptance of the smile.
Mm-hmm.
And in big cities, it's because I'm very much that way. I don't smile at other people. I don't necessarily like it when I receive the smile.
Don't look at me.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in a random area and just walking down the street, someone smiles at me, I'm like, what are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that's a city thing. But when you talk about leading with a smile, it's just having a smile on your face all the time, being positive, and it's not necessarily the stranger on the street, but it can be the people in your life.
Yeah.
Your coworkers, your family, your siblings, kids, all those things. When you've got that smile on your face, it does make a big difference.
It's interesting to, like, when I come walk in the door when I get home from work or something like that. If I've been stuck in traffic, I usually have, you know, I try to do this is I usually try to take a break in the car and just kind of like brush off what's going on for the day or anything like that. And that way I don't carry that through the front door with my kids. But sometimes, like it's just too much go all the time. And so I don't have time to stop and shake it off. So I walk in the door and I'm like, it's a mess. Everything's everywhere and there's nothing in its right place. I'm going to come unglued. You're making me angry. Like it's just getting worse and
Hulk
worse.
mode.
Exactly. And so like I'm like I'll do it with a smile, but I'm yelling, like it happens sometimes, but you're right. If I come in and like I've left my anything else of the day, I've left it outside and walk in the door, my interaction even with my children is is much better. It's a lot smoother.
Mhm.
Even if I walk in and it's chaos, it's a lot smoother than if I bring my chaos into that. And then it's just even worse. So
Yeah, we have a rule in our house. So, because I, being autistic, I have a hard time talking to people and doing that, which is ironic considering what I do is coaching and consulting. But I'm really good at what I do.
yeah,
It's just it drains me. Some people get very excited and built up by doing these kinds of things. Not me.
yeah,
So by the end of the day, I'm really drained. And so we have a rule in the house that I get a half hour when I get home. So I get to come home, sit in my chair, do whatever for a half hour before anyone comes and talks to me. So if I'm in a really good mood that day, my kids can tell. They can really tell the difference between when I'm in a good mood or when I'm drained.
hmm
And so if I'm in a good mood that day, so I probably didn't have any calls that day, then, they'll be really giddy at the door. The other night, one of my daughters was sitting on the floor, preventing me from opening the garage door to get in the house. And it was fun. I mean, it was amusing for the two of us. Because a few minutes before that, when she came out the garage door to see me pull in to the garage, and as soon as I saw her, she said, "Hi, Daddy." So I put the car in reverse and backed out of the garage. And so, she was getting me back for teasing her. So she knew I was in a good mood. But beyond that, we do have that rule that, I need that chance to decompress because otherwise I'm in that foul mood because I'm just drained. I don't have the patience anymore for really anything. And just that communication, that openness, and again, knowing we're all on a different journey. And then I can face the rest of the day with a positive attitude. So
I think one of the other ones that stands out to me. I don't know. Do you want to take one, or do you? I got one more.
no, go ahead.
So I think this is something for a good example in that I try to be, but it's this forgiveness brings inner peace. Um, you know, it's really really easy for us to, and it also helps motivate Karens. Um, if you let everything just kind of stack up and you're like, okay, I'm keeping it. I got a little notepad here and I'm like, so and so did this to me. And so like this bag of rocks that you're just carrying around and
Your hit list.
yeah, and you're just waiting for the opportunity to go back at that and tackle it. And honestly, like I have seen that. I don't talk a lot about it, but on a spiritual side, I've taught in church about it. But forgiveness isn't necessarily a religious function of ourself. It's something of letting go the chain that you've attached yourself to in that whatever has that offense against you. So somebody says something about you, you take that and you latch a chain to it for the rest of your life. You are now dragging that, or you can break that chain, just forgive and let it go, forget it. And then you aren't bound to that anymore. And that's honestly what's interesting is most people don't understand that forgiveness is literally just that. It is letting go of those things so that you can find peace in your unique story, rather than carrying someone else with you along the way, you know?
Yeah. It's forgiveness is not about the other person
Yeah.
at all, ever.
Yep.
They may not even know that they offended you.
Right.
You're the one taking offense to the situation. And so it's your responsibility to forgive them. That's how you get better.
Yep.
You know, it's forgiveness is one thing that's really, really big in our house. You know, there's a lot that we deal with, you know, with the trauma that these kids have faced in the past. One thing that we're taught to do, and I mean, we already had this idea, but this is one thing that is in a lot of the trainings that we have to do as foster parents, is focusing on the child and not the behavior. Because a lot of the behaviors exhibited by kids in foster care are simply reactions to the world around them. They're not bad kids. They are simply reacting to survive. And so they react in ways that we don't understand because that's helped them to survive when they weren't in our homes.
Yeah.
And so we think it's bad, but it's really them just surviving. And so there are a lot of times where you have to, one, help them to learn how to forgive the people in their past, but also you have to forgive them for anything that they might have done.
Mm-hmm.
So here's some examples. One of my daughters, she has broken my nose twice, cracked a rib, dislocated another rib. She beat me black and blue. I mean, we had to call the ambulance. That's how bad my face was. Wow. I don't think she broke my nose that time. That was not one of the broken nose times.
I mean, I've known you for a number of years, and I don't think I've ever seen you look like you've been beat up. So,
yeah, I usually take some time off for those.
Those are those moments where I was like, "Where's Joe?"
I've got a couple of scars from where she's bitten me, and I mean, these are the behaviors of a scared kid.
Yeah,
she's reacting. It's the same reason why you don't go up to a bear in the wild and say, "Hi, let me pet you." You know, or come between a mama bear and her cubs. I mean, that's just the stupidest thing you can do. But because that bear is going to come after you, they're acting instinctually. There's nothing wrong with what they've done. They are just acting instinctually. Mm-hmm. And so that's what these kids are doing to survive. They are just trying to survive. And if I took any of that personally, it would completely damage my relationship with my daughter.
Yeah.
But you can't take those things. You know where they're coming from. And in this situation, it's not necessarily forgiveness because I don't hold it against her at all. But it's kind of the same concept of there is nothing to be angry at her about. Yeah, she's caused a lot of injuries. But, you know, why? Why carry that with me forever?
I think a good thing that you can arm yourself with is, you know, and it's actually another one that's on here, is kindness is a strength. It's something that, you know, I look at this act of forgiveness as it's almost like pre-forgiving. It's like, you know, and a word that I would use normally is grace, giving somebody some grace, knowing like, hey man, you have a rough story and I'm here through it all. Like I'm here to help, be here. If it hurts, if it's hard, if it's difficult, if it's challenging, if it's emotional, I'm still standing in this space. And if it means that I'm going to take the brunt of those hits and strikes for a minute, you know, I've doused this thing with grace so that I don't have to struggle with forgiveness later. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that, you know, like it's that hoping the best in a lot of things, especially the ones that we care about deeply. We give that grace without any condition. So, you know, it's not something that we're like, well, if you are such and such, you will. I do that for my kids only if they're doing like lawn work or something like that. You know, like if you cut the grass, I will do. You know, but it has nothing to do with how much I love them, how much grace I give them, and you know, so it's like pre-forgiveness. It's already there.
It's the idea of unconditional love. People profess unconditional love, but they still have conditional love.
Yes.
And it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, because both of my daughters living at home right now were in previous foster homes that one was adopted by that home and another one was going to be. But then they were both given back to the state, which is very, very, I mean, I'm glad they're in my home. I love my daughters. I'm glad I have them. But it's still very frustrating that these previous families turned them in, gave up on them. And it was for, when you have a kid, whether biological, adoptive, foster, I don't care what the situation is, no relationship at all or no connection at all, there is no room for conditional love. It's not, if you clean your room, if you're a good kid, I will love you. No, you love them. Doesn't matter if they break your ribs, you love them. It doesn't matter if they are, I tell my daughters, there is nothing you can do. There's only one thing that they can do, but there's basically nothing that they can do that will make us not love them or give up on them. So you could murder someone and be in jail for the rest of your life. We will still love you. There is only one condition to that. I'm not going to go into that, but there is only one situation where we wouldn't. But that's unconditional love. It doesn't matter.
I think conditional love is really exhausting, on both sides, like exhausting on the person who has to meet those conditions, and exhausting on the person who's evaluating the conditions. Like,
right.
I'm like, that's way too much work, man. Like, chill. It's unconditional for a reason. Like, yeah. So I think that we've gone way off course from the no, and I just can't bear it anymore. What I'm going to have to do is I need to talk about something that happened just recently, a couple days ago, actually. So there was this situation that all the people sitting around were growling. There was a lot of growling going on. They were mad because the flight was delayed because a bear was in the storage compartment, the cargo hold, and had gotten out of its cage and was roaming around the bottom of the airplane. I mean, I'm glad that there's a separation. I hope. I mean, like, I don't know what kind of plane this was. It says aircraft. It could have been like a C-130, and that'd be really terrifying because you're like, oh, that bear is right there. I'm in the same cargo hold as that bear, But the bear got out, and there was a bear on a plane in a cargo hold that got out. Luckily, it was before it was mid-flight, so it hadn't taken off yet. But yes, lots of angry, growling customers sitting on that plane waiting for them to basically tranquilize the bear, get it back down and nice and comfortable back in its cage. And what's interesting is the article talks about how the authorities, they went through all the steps, they took all the precautions, everything to transport animals, and but yet this happened, and everyone's like, well, it's well, I should mention the flight. So it's Iraqi Airlines, and it was a flight from Dubai headed to Baghdad. And so basically from Dubai, some person was bringing a bear and was headed to Baghdad. And I guess one of the things that the authorities and the government authorities in Iraq are talking about is this: it's common for the wealthy people to have these exotic animals. And it's even more common, they're trying to figure out how to stop this, is this, they'll release the animals into the city's streets. Like, they just get loose. I mean, the bear got out in a plane, so I have no doubt the bear's getting out some other day.
Yeah.
Okay? It's happening. So I just don't know when, but it'll be the news, It's going to eat a neighbor cat. I don't know what it like. I've been to Baghdad. I don't know if there's neighbor cats. I saw some cats. They weren't very nice. So maybe the cat could hold its own. But the other problem is that they get these exotic animals and the restaurants pick them up and they serve them as exotic dishes.
Oh, man.
So it's like, guys, okay, like the easy solution to this if somebody asks you to cage a bear and put it on a plane, the whole topic of our conversation today is no. Just say no, guys. Come on.
I don't think that was Smokey Bear's tagline, but maybe now it should be. Oh man.
So, all right. Well, we have reached the end of our show for today, and as always, I want to let you guys know that life is too short. So keep laughing and keep learning, and remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.